This episode brought to you by Discovery Bank. Ready to experience the future of banking now? Get on board. Discovery Bank Limited is an authorized FSP 48657. T's and C's apply. So, you think you want to be a CEO?
I will not always say what you want me to say, but I will never lie to you. I will always speak the truth.
The power, the status, the money.
Everyone wants to be part of a winning organization, and if they think that by following you and associating with you, you will help them win, then you have broken through the first barrier and you begin to build trust.
Is it all it's cracked up to be?
What I have learned is to suspend that moment of gratification or hubris and to allow the system to give you the correct feedback because you are defaulting towards a feedback that suits you.
Kieswetter has made a career in cleaning up others' messes. Not intentional, well, not the choosing of the jobs, but it served him well. He's served at the top of public and private companies. He's even started a few of his own. His first big job was as the youngest ever power station manager in the history of Eskom, having to win over reluctant reports who weren't so convinced about this idea of economic transformation. He joined and rose in senior positions within the South African Revenue Service, then spent some time as executive at FirstRand, became the boss at Alexander Forbes, and completed his last executive role tidying up the mess left by his predecessor at the South African Revenue Service. So, what does it take to be a CEO?
The real job of a CEO is hardly ever expressed in the job description. If I share with you two recent anecdotes and personal experiences, there was nowhere in the job description that I would inherit a R1 billion civil claim, 21 criminal charges, potentially a R3.5 billion tax bill, a reputation that was shot, and that we were barely making the financial returns to not breach our financial covenants. SARS, similarly, nowhere in the job description was there any reference to the fact that I would walk into an organization that would be severely traumatized. People would have disconnected from the leadership, an erosion of trust, a dismantling of tried and tested organizational arrangements, that the company would have suffered a decline in integrity and governance. The only thing that was visible was the revenue performance and a few other data points. So in essence, the job description is the least reliable reference if you want to truly understand. It's only when you step into the office, into the chair, that the real job emerges.
So then, what does it mean to be CEO? Because if the job description isn't the financial statements, it's something considerably bigger, broader, and more complicated, probably.
Sure, and I often refer to that the invisible work that frames the work of a CEO, and that's not on the organizational charts or in the financial statements, as you say. So firstly, in my experience, a CEO often has to carry institutional anxiety, which is whilst everyone is asleep, while shareholders worry about financial performance, the CEO has to absorb uncertainty so that the organization can function. The CEO is the visible symbol of management, but every gesture is read and interpreted. Where you sit, who you first call into a room, what you say in a corridor, what you don't say. So much energy goes into these signals that you can never put on a slide. If you think about the announcements that CEO makes publicly, by the time the decision actually goes public, so much has already gone into preparing for that statement, often at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And of course, holding that institution continuity across the line throughout the term are some of the things. So what does it take? Well, firstly, I think it is an awareness and a sense of presence and clarity with what the true job entails. That, as I said earlier on, which is not in the job description. To grasp that, I must say, one of the things that I found a real blessing was the Nugent report. The Nugent report, in my case, very quickly crystallized what I could expect, even though, as I said, not all of that was clear, but it gave me a sense, and only when I immersed myself into the organization, it became clearer. But you have to then be on the ground, talk to people, listen to people, and that then emerges with a clear sense of the state of the organization that you inherit. And almost always, when a new CEO comes in, except for the kind of traditional retirements, it is because the shareholders or the decision makers felt there was a need for change. Secondly, what is also important is to then very quickly, and again, this is the soft stuff and the invisible stuff, is to connect with people, because the CEO is one person. And unless you can connect with people and what I call get them to fly information, you will not be a very good CEO. And that's not formulating a strategy or a articulate vision. It's really about the hearts and the minds. You cannot legislate followership. You can only inspire it. And so being a CEO, as I said, is often about those unstated, invisible things that takes place outside of the public eye, outside of the boardroom, but that defines success or failure.
And you've gone into two traumatized organizations with very severe issues that had to be dealt with. And in amongst all of that wreckage is the human wreckage, people who have lost faith in the future of the business, people who have lost faith in the future of leadership of the company. You come in and you need to put your very best foot forward without being naive, because people will smell that as being ignorant, and without being too negative about it, because people will see that as weakness. How do you balance a CEO going into traumatized organizations, those dichotomies?
It's interesting. If I take the practical example of SARS, the mandate is very clear. It's cast in law. You don't have to guess what the mandate objectives of SARS is and what success would mean. The role and the authority of the commissioner is very clear. It's cast in law. It is about the manner, the connection to human beings who have fears and anxieties and who look to you precisely because they're looking for something to believe in, for someone to believe in. Human beings are always looking for that steward that they can trust, a leader they can follow. And CEOs have the inordinate privilege to walk into an organization and to actually be the one that would provide that leadership. And one must never have a sense of entitlement, because it is an inordinate responsibility. If I think of the work of Collins, who speaks of level 5 leadership, he talks about having this fearless resolve to achieve something great, but at the same time, the genuine humility to know that you cannot do it on your own. You need people. I had a funny moment in Alexander Forbes when I walked in. On the wall in the old building, there was a poster that says, "This place is crawling with actuaries." And of course, I very soon asked them to take that off. And one of the actuaries were quite offended and walked into my office one day and said, "Why do you think you can lead Alexander Forbes? You are not an actuary." And that's because people, regardless of who the person is, already give you a big benefit of the doubt simply because you are one of them. So how does a non-actuary demonstrate that you are one of them? Well, it is to provide something maybe that actuaries can't, and that's to tap into that deep desire of people to want to belong to something that is noble, noteworthy. And one of the first issues I did, therefore, was on my first morning by 10 o'clock, everyone got an introductory letter from me And in the letter, I made it very clear that I came in with an inordinate sense of privilege. I set out what people could expect of me, what I would expect of them and hold them accountable for, and what I thought we could do and achieve together. And that's the operative word. What can you achieve together? Everyone wants to be part of a winning organization. And if they think that by following you and associating with you, you will help them win, then you have broken through the first barrier and you begin to build trust.
Trust is absolutely pivotal, and particularly in those early days, and especially in organizations that have elements of questionable individuals still within their ranks. And I think you experienced that at both organizations. You need to know who you can and cannot trust. So how do you speedily, in a dysfunctional environment, establish who is and is not to be trusted? Because they may have hoodwinked the last team of leaders in the organization, and you don't want to fall prey to that as well.
So you can adopt one of two extremes, I imagine. The first is you can naively trust everyone, or the second is you can cynically distrust everyone. I've tended to work from a very different premise. And the first is to say to people, it is my natural inclination to trust you, but I have no evidence to do so. I will therefore create as many opportunities between the two of us, because you can't build trust one to many. You have to build trust one to one. And in the case of SARS, I spoke to the top 70 and said to them, I want to give you the assurance I do not have a hit list. Many of you I've worked with before, others I've never met in your life. So why don't we start by building a relationship, one opportunity at a time, and I will demonstrate to you, I will not always say what you want me to say, but I will never lie to you. I will always speak the truth. That was followed by, in my case, about 5 or 6 names of executives who were mentioned in the Nugent report. And I said to them, I also want you to know that I'm going to have, in the next day, a one-on-one with each of you, and I will tell you what the way forward is. So don't leave people guessing, but also don't claim that you're going to be this all-trusting person naively. I think call people into a relationship of mutual shared responsibility to build that trust. And I think it's worked for me at Alexander Forbes. It's also worked for me at SARS.
And you've also had other non-executive roles where you've been chairman, and it's a story that you told me once, and I will do it without naming names here because I can't remember if it was in confidence or not, but let's try anyway, where there was a very senior authority figure within a public enterprise who was under investigation, who had lost a child. I'm even avoiding the gender of the child. And you went up to this individual and you commiserated with them about the loss of their child, but in that moment also made clear to them that your role in that organization was to ensure that the process against them was followed through to the fullest extent that it should be. Do you recall that incident?
Well, let me first compliment you on your recollection. I'm impressed. So it is about finding those human moments without necessarily allowing it to compromise or adulterate the process that you're engaged in. And yes, in the case of this individual, we had a high sense that it would probably lead into us parting ways. But that didn't mean that I had to behave in a way that did not understand the pain that he was going through as a parent, through the loss of a child. And that right in that moment, we needed to suspend the formality of our relationship and just be two fathers and to hug each other. I can tell you of so many other examples where similar instances come up. And all you need to be is to just be human and create that moment of shared empathy. I think that's very important. The old textbooks had this two-dimensional way, which isn't always as simplistic in reality, but it says you can be task-oriented or people-oriented. And then they draw this diagonal that says the most successful CEOs know throughout their tenure and in every assignment how to find that fine balance between task orientation and human orientation.
But in reality, though, in that moment, the role of CEO, and a lot of people might struggle to swallow this, but it is knowing when to be performance orientated and when to be human. And maybe that is the character trait that differentiates those that are truly successful from those who, get forgotten the moment they walk out the door.
Bruce, one of the things I have learned is that people can deal much better with the truth, as hard as it may be, than they can deal with knowing they've been lied to. And far too often, if you try and avoid the tough conversations, let me just use this placeholder for so many things. If you try and be nice to people, but in reality, you know that you're going to have to make some firm decisions, people will not know when to trust you. I can tell you, some of the people against whom I've taken the toughest decisions in a professional sense have remained in friendly relationships with me afterwards because they respect the fact that you've never lied to them. You've been truthful. I've had the most wonderful tributes when I left SARS from union leaders. And one of the ladies said, Commissioner, when you started, you said to us, we will not always agree with you, but you will always tell the truth and we will never have to doubt what you say. I want to tell you, you were absolutely correct. There were many days when we didn't agree with you, but we never ever doubted you. We never ever did not believe what you told us. And I think speaking the truth, rather than saying the things that you think may mask the truth because you're trying to be insincerely nice, I think the damage that is wrought after that is far more severe in the way that people relate to you. So building trust is not one big thing. It is demonstrated in little things, but consistently saying what you mean what you say, and speaking the truth, even when you know it may create a moment of tension.
We've all been in rooms with people when things have hung on a very, very thin wire, and it's a make or break time. And the role of the CEO at a time like that can be to amplify the positives and play down the negatives. They're not exactly lying, but they're not telling the truth either. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you've left the room going, gee, I hope they swallowed that because I'm not sure I did?
I mean, and I can't claim victory because you didn't. The other thing about a CEO is you often only measure people's reaction by what they say and what they show. And often that which is not said and not shown is far more defining of what that moment meant. On days like that, I think CEOs have the natural inclination for self-affirmation and for hubris, because you need to feel good about any decision that you've taken. What I have learned is to suspend that moment of gratification or hubris and to allow the system to give you the correct feedback, because you are defaulting towards a feedback that suits you. And the system never lies. It'll come back to you in one way or other if you're prepared to remain curious, to remain genuinely interested in how people have felt, and you will get helpful feedback. And then I think what's important is where you believe, wittingly or unwittingly, you may have hurt someone, you may have said something which was offensive. Have the courage to go and say, I am sorry, and to talk about it. And I've had to do that on a number of occasions where I've had to call in someone and apologize and say, I'm sorry. I can imagine how that made you feel, or on reflection, I can now also understand why that might not have come across in the way that it was intended. And people value that.
It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, though, because a lot of CEOs see themselves as the ultimate authority figure. And if a couple of people have their little wings broken in the process, well, that's just the school of hard knocks. Bad luck to you. What is the benefit of being more empathetic in that role?
For me, the benefit is the enduring relationship, because at the end of the day, technology is patient, it's deployable, it's undeployable, it comes and it goes. Financial resources, physical resources, you can deploy and suspend at will. For me, the only enduring competitive advantage for any organization to sustainably perform is because of its people. And I say that even as we emerge into an age of AI, where increasingly a lot more work, routine tasks will be taken over by AI agents, even then it's important to know that people is the real magic in every business. I've always worked on that. In fact, when I was a young power station manager, my first time at SARS, walking in as a CEO of Alexander Forbes, and my recent role at SARS, I've always found that when you connect to people, that's an investment that has the most enduring return for yourself, for the people involved, but ultimately for the organization.
What happens when that isn't reciprocated, or people don't respond in a way that you might expect, and they don't appreciate that level of humanity that you might choose to exhibit toward them, and they don't return the favor?
Most people always do. In every organization, there will be the disbelievers. The actuary who thought only actuaries could run Alexander Forbes, or I guess a senior tax auditor who thinks that to be the commissioner of SARS, you must be a tax auditor. So I have found, though, that most people, they warm up to what I call steward leadership. And for me, steward leadership is about firstly understanding that you're holding trust, the interest of others, and you genuinely go out of your way to demonstrate an interest in the well-being of people. Secondly, that you continually remind people of the highest possible cause and not just pursuit of narrow interest. And people want to be part of a worthy cause. And then I think to the smaller, and it's always in my experience, a few individuals that can make or break you, but almost always they are the disbelievers. The investment in turning around a disbeliever into a believer is you often gain one of your most profound supporters and advocates. I remember, if I can share an anecdote with you, when I walked into Kendal Power Station as a production manager en route to becoming power station manager of Matla about a year before that, I knew, and let me put that in the South African context, most of the operators on the desks were not of the cultural group I came from, certainly not of the ethnic group.
They were white, yes.
that I came from. And they were certainly not, I never belonged to a trade union at Eskom or belonged to a political party, but they certainly, if I had to join a political party or trade union, would not have belonged to the ones that I would belong to. And what I needed to do was to say, how do I connect with Piet? Piet is on Unit 5. He can make or break me as a production manager. And I would walk to Piet, greet him, and ask him, Piet, so how's it at home? How's the family? And I do that genuinely. And then I spot an N2 maths book on Piet's desk. And I would say to Piet, let me say that in Afrikaans and I'll translate, Piet, hoe gaan het met die wiskunde? And Piet would use the most expressive expletives to tell me how things are going with the maths or how they weren't going.
Of course.
You can just imagine the kind of words Piet would use. I'd say to Piet, Piet, why don't you come and have a cup of tea with me at the end of your shift, and we'll go through some of the problems that you must have for your next assignment. And I would sit with Piet. And after helping Piet solve his maths N2, I literally could ask Piet anything. And if there was a problem overnight, and I came and I read through the logs, Piet would say, kom meneer, laat ek jou gaan wys. and he would open up. He would show me what he probably would not have shown or shared with me if he thought he could not trust me or if he saw me as this other. And so you're able to transcend these cultural language and other barriers that hold people apart. Because at the core of it, we all have more in common than what separates us. And I think being a good leader is about identifying those common threads of our humanity and connecting to that in a sincere way. I have found, especially in those early years when I joined Eskom from being uninitiated from the Western Cape, on the Highveld, that simply by building those human connections, people are open, they open up, they share with you what the other would not, and they help you become successful. I mean, by the way, Piet is not just a fictitious name that I have mentioned there. I can give you many more names of real people that have become wonderful people in my life that when they see me, they walk up and they embrace me.
From the start, the ambition was clear: to build a bank that could be more than a bank. One that rewards better decisions, connects the ecosystems that shape your life, and gets smarter the more you engage. That ambition is now a reality. With Discovery Bank, your entire financial life comes together in one intelligent platform, accessed through a single app. It understands your behavior, works harder for you over time, and helps you build your financial future with confidence. Discovery Bank, the future of banking. Now.
Talk to me then about the best part of the job from your perspective. Clearly, it's a role that you, if not relish, it is something that you are certainly adept to doing. What is it that makes you want to do it, or has made you want to do it in the past?
I've been very fortunate, Bruce, that in my multiple careers that I've had as an educator, as a young power plant manager, at SARS first and second term, and at Alexander Forbes, that each of these roles had a sense of higher purpose, a purpose bigger than ourselves. At Eskom, for example, we used to say to our coal workers, whose job was incredibly unpleasant, dirty, and unfulfilling otherwise, I would take a shovel of coal and show it to them, and I say to them, do you know that this shovel of coal, when it finally reaches a little boy in Diepsloot or in Orange Farm, will light up a bulb that will allow that little boy or girl to fulfill their dreams, to become a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, and connect the work that we do to the quality of life that we impact on people. Tax no different. The gogo, whose life would be destitute without the old age grant that she gets, even the miserly 350 social relief of distress grant, which doesn't even cover a meal out for most of us, is life-defining for those who receive it. And so the ability to always connect one's work to the higher purpose and knowing that the work has transformative impact. And I've been fortunate. As a teacher, you impact people's lives. As a Eskom takes coal and turns it into quality of life. Alexander Forbes fulfill dreams of financial peace of mind. SARS enables the building of a well-functioning democracy. So I've been fortunate that in each of these roles, I've been able to connect to a higher purpose and know the difference we make. And that has always been the most fulfilling part of the work that I've done.
I can see why you become a compelling preacher, you see, because you talk about these very good attributes. There must be times, though, where you have gone, really? Do I need this in my life? Honestly, I didn't sign up for this. This wasn't in the job description. It wasn't even mentioned in the interview process. I feel as if I've been duped somewhat. Maybe I didn't ask the right questions, but this is a terrible job. Surely at some point, even you, with this higher sense of purpose, must have felt bewildered as to the choices you've made.
Bruce, at least once a day. Not now and then. Not now and then. Let me tell you, there isn't a day that goes by when you don't feel a sense of deep frustration. You want to walk away. I mean, And I'm on the public record to say that I am, absolutely frustrated very often by legislation in the public sector that is, I guess, when they were crafted, meant to enable you, but does the exact opposite. If you look at the procurement corruption in the public sector, not the PFMA, the threat of a unqualified audit result by the JSE, the National Treasury regulations, none of that prevented wholesale corruption of the government procurement system. And yet, that's the legislation that disempowers and disables CEOs or directors general or accounting officers like myself who just want to get the job done. So in one instance, I have to wait 15 months because of a disenabling process to hire someone that I know will be good for the organization because of just the way that the codification of the procurement and the recruitment system. And unfortunately, institutions of government are often designed to prevent loss, to ensure compliance, not to win. And so there isn't a day that go by that I wish I could decide what the budget of SARS should be instead of fighting for more money. There isn't a day that go by that wish if I spotted Bruce Whitfield and I thought he would be a good hire, that I can't just pick up the phone and say, Bruce, are you interested in joining SARS? Let's sit down, let's talk, let's hire you and be done with it. There isn't a day when I go by and I look at a service provider that I know will make a difference, but I have to follow this completely frustrating, mind-numbingly disenabling process. And so we are process-driven, not impact-driven. And so let me tell you, every single day you have the frustration. And when you want to walk, you ask yourself, I'll tell you a little lesson I learned from my dad when I was a young 18-year-old, still very involved in the ministry in the church. I was frustrated one day by the ineptitude of what I, as a young, probably arrogant, first-year post-matric educated young lad, and I could see the flaws and the faults in the leadership at the time. And I came on one afternoon and I said to my dad, I don't want anything to do with the church anymore. And he looked at me and he said, why? And I started giving him in detail what I saw was wrong in the leaders at the time. And he said to me the following. He said, if you are so convinced that those things are wrong, do you think by walking away, those things that are wrong will come right? I looked at him, I said, probably not. And he said, well, so if you are right, then isn't it worthwhile to just bear the pain and the frustration and continue to chip away at what you believe is wrong in order to bring about that which is right? Don't you think that'll be more fulfilling? And that lesson has stayed with me throughout. And it has given me the capacity to see through these frustrating moments when the personal pain, the ridicule often, the public criticism that you often get, you just build the capacity to bear all of those because you focus on the sense of personal conviction that you can make a difference, albeit however small.
A couple of quick fire questions, if I may. What's been the biggest mistake you've made as a CEO that you're willing to admit to that won't get you convicted and thrown in jail?
I think moving too fast ahead of the troops, leaving them behind. And I can share a number of times when that was the case, when you then have to stop and come back and not be that leader that disappears into the future, but make sure that people stay behind you. I mean, there's this wonderful African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's been the biggest lesson for me. Always make sure people are with you. And in every instance where I've ignored that, I've had to come back and do some repair.
Have you ever wondered whether or not you had the right team around you? Perhaps it was them, or have you been able to admit that perhaps it's you as somebody with vision, somebody with an overarching view of how things should be, not appreciating perhaps how hard it is to make it happen in that way.
I guess the Calvinist in me always started looking for the fault in myself. So in almost every, whether it is my role as a father, as a partner, as a manager, and thankfully, because I think that's been useful, I've almost always started by self-ridicule, self-critique, rather than starting with others. I found that to be far more empowering. And, if you can lie to yourself, it's easy to lie to others. So being brutally honest with yourself, and I actually as a young youth, experienced that, to be honest to anyone else, you have to start by being honest with yourself, because you're the biggest sucker to lie to, because you want to believe the best about yourself. So I've always, as a matter of practice and principle, do analysis starting with myself, never with other people. But then when I do identify contributing factors in one of the team members, I unapologetically take that on as well.
What has kept you on the straight and narrow throughout your career in terms of calling you out when you've misstepped? Have you been able to do that yourself? Or has there been somebody, or maybe some people, who would pick up the phone and say, I saw you do this. Do you really think that was the best way you could have handled it, for example?
I mean, first of all, you're making the assumption I've always stayed on the straight and narrow. What I can say without fear of contradiction, I have always tried to act with integrity within the law, within the realms of my authority delegated, and have striven never to be compromised, beholden to anyone else other than the law and my conscience. And that's worked well for me. But I've always sought out advice, not wait for people to give me feedback. So the late Pravin Gordon was someone I would pick up the phone and test an idea with. I have former colleagues and friends still alive, so I won't mention their names, who regularly walk with me and talk with me. And then I had my own mother. My mother would not hold back to give me feedback when she thought I did something good, but also when she thought that I erred in her eyes. I think that for me, one of the hallmarks of steward leaders, especially as opposed to egotistical leaders, is their ability to take feedback, and when it's not volunteered, to ask for it. That's been one of my biggest sources of learning.
Are there things you look back on in your career and you go, could have, should have, would have done that better? And when you've let people down, have you always fessed up to them? Have you always made the apology as the leader? Somebody you might have fired, somebody you might have worked out of a job, somebody you may have sidelined, and in retrospect, perhaps you were mistaken.
It's hard to recall a specific example, but I was a young head of the electrical engineering division at Athlone Technicon, and I had to fire a colleague. And I remember the endless conversations, counseling and pastoral I've had with the wife of this individual, and saw her pain and anxiety and her wish that this was not the outcome. Those are horrible moments, Bruce, when you know you've taken a decision that may have had merit on the individual, but where there are innocent bystanders like a family or children. You have to deal with the consequences. You never, ever, just walk away from that without feeling like a thug. And so I think, born out of that early experience is, if you're going to make a decision that can fundamentally change the day-to-day lived reality of families, not just the individual, then create as many opportunities before that for people to reflect on their behavior, the opportunity to mend their ways. And many do, and have avoided the ultimate sanction, so that by the time you do make the ultimate decision to terminate someone's employment, that you know that your conscience is clear. And ultimately, you have to make peace with the fact, and you live with your own conscience. One of the things that I was involved in when I joined the bank was we came up with a very smart plan to implement what was initially considered an 18-month implementation program into a 100-day project. which from a business perspective was great, except the collateral damage was the retrenchment of 1,800 people around the country. I made a decision then that the next time I have to retrench people, I should resign first, because leaders should see far enough to know that a retrenchment may be coming down the line and to make the decisions that could avert that catastrophe. So when I walked into Alexander Forbes, one of the first Exco meetings, one of the divisional CEOs came with a list of 40 people that he wanted to retrench so that they could cut their costs back and remain profitable. I went to the list and I said, I do not see a single manager's name on this list. So why don't you go back and tell me how many managers you're going to start retrenching, because managers are the cause of why we now have to retrench people. Needless to say, they never came back with a list. I then also faced our employees who wanted at the time a 6% salary increase. We weren't unionized, so it was a bit easier. And I went to our employees and I said, we have two choices. I give you a 3.5% increase to the salary bill, no fixed increase for any individual, but you'll be increased on merit. But I give you the guarantee for as long as I'm here, we will not retrench a single person if you work with me. And I'm very proud to say that 6 years later, we lived up to that. And so, to some of the decisions that CEOs should be prepared to fall in their sword on are those long-sighted decisions which, when you make them early enough, can avoid affecting people in a catastrophic way.
What sort of things have kept you awake at night or woken you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have had you going could have, should have, would have, or how on earth do I deal with this? Do you suffer from that?
Well, generally, I'm so tired by the time I get to bed, not much keeps me awake at night. But I do spend a lot of time reflecting on the decisions we've made, the decisions we've not made. And, there's a word that says the opposite of not believing something is not doubting it. It is keeping an open mind. And I've found that when you reflect on the day and you leave your mind open, it will tell you where you could have done better and where you can be at peace. And generally, that's the thoughts that kind of towards the end of the day I engage in. What is terrible, though, if I know I have a tough day ahead of me, that is more likely to keep me awake at night, because your mind works overtime, replaying and kind of enacting a big announcement you're going to make, like the revenue announcement that we make and the announcements that's so defining. So that's more likely to keep me awake, is the things that I still have to do than the things that I've already done.
Knowing what you know now, with all of the experiences that you've had and all of the ups and downs that you've endured and all of the messes that you've had to clean up, would you want to be a CEO again?
Well, in my next period of my life, I've established a company that will codify 40 years of experience with incontestable evidence of having been able to fix broken things as a young power station manager through to the Commissioner of SARS. I'm busy codifying that and creating a solutions laboratory to help companies. And I will be the CEO, the founder CEO of Vector Solutions Laboratory. So I think, again, there's no job description for this one. So I only have myself to blame if it turns out to be a nightmare. But I think it's not about being the CEO as much as it is the privilege and the excitement to create something which starts out as a dream and a vision, and then that painstaking attention to detail along the way to see it come into fruition. I think that's really what keeps people like myself going. And I think the minute and it's all purpose-driven, and I think the minute you have no purpose, you have no function, and then the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth.
That's Edward Kieswetter. The hard jobs are the ones that ultimately turn out to be the most worthwhile. When you inherit the mess, move deliberately to figure out who was part of the problem and who is part of the solution to support your turnaround. And rebuilding self-belief within organizations is a superpower, especially when those who came before you were in it purely for themselves. Leave organizations in better shape than you found them, and the next door will always open to you. This episode of So You Think You Want to Be a CEO is powered by Discovery Bank. Discovery Bank is an authorized FSP 48657. T's and C's apply.